If you're considering a switch to an off-brand MS medication, you might be wondering, will this drug work the same as the one I was on before, and will there be side effects? My name is Dr. Derrick Robertson. I'm a neurologist as well as an MS specialist, and this is the question I get asked often. Let's talk through the guidance I might give my patients when they are grappling with some of those same questions. Okay, so what does that shared decision-making conversation look like when we're discussing medications with patients, whether you're on a current branded medication and are considering a switch to a generic, whether you're going to start right away on a generic medication. So kind of looking at it through the lens of two big buckets. So is it effective? Is it going to work for the disease of MS? And again, we'll talk a little bit about generic effectiveness now that we have a biosimilar effectiveness. And then we'll balance that with the safety questions, because the medication is useless if it's really effective and it's poorly tolerated. And so kind of understanding the medication's effect through those two different pathways is how we discuss medications with our patients in the clinic. So first, maybe generic effectiveness. So again, as a reminder for how that approval process looks like, it has to have a similar chemical compound as the name brand. And so that when it can prove that equivalence, the medication can become FDA approved. And we have many examples, thankfully, now. And so for years, we've been able to effectively use generics to help our patients that have relapsing MS, whether it's generic injectable medications for years and years, and now more recently, over the last few years, the use of generic oral disease-modifying medications, things like teriflunomide, dimethyl fumarate, and then now fingolimod. These are medications that have very similar effectiveness, as they should, given that they were able to have that same chemical compound compared to branded. When we think about biosimilars, though, so biosimilars, we have a biosimilar that's FDA approved, and it's a generic version of natalizumab. But again, biosimilar would be the correct term to use there. And I do not have any current patients on it. It just recently gained FDA approval. But I anticipate over the coming months to years, we'll see that same pathway, because in other diseases that affect the human body, cancers, other autoimmune diseases, there have been the use of biosimilars for quite some time with that effectiveness holding up, and comfort levels exist for cancer doctors and other autoimmune disease physicians that they feel comfortable using that. And in fact, there was a large phase 3 study called Antelope that attempted to answer this question for us, and what led to helping the medication Tyruko or biosimilar natalizumab gain FDA approval. It was a decently sized study. It was over 200 patients. Patients either received reference medication, in that case Tysabri, or the biosimilar natalizumab, and then they were followed for over roughly 1 year. Half the patients stayed on the Tyruko for the whole year, and then the other half, they were followed for roughly 6 months. And at that 6-month point, some of those patients that had been on the reference drug Tysabri were switched. They didn't know it, but they were switched to Tyruko, and then they were followed for the rest of that year. And what that helped address is, were the medications similar in safety, efficacy, and then a term called immunogenicity, to making sure when patients switch from one to the other, that there was not a poor tolerability effect of the person's immune system reacting in some way to the new medication. And the answer from the end of the clinical study was no. There was no difference in safety, efficacy, and immunogenicity between the two medications. That's how that added to the story of the medicine of the biosimilar gaining FDA approval, Tyruko, or again, biosimilar natalizumab. So that's the first lens. Is it effective? We have clinical trial data now for the biosimilar to show that it is. Broadly about side effects, though. And so generics, again, years and years and years. So we have a proven effectiveness of use for years in our patients with the use of generics. Very similar understanding with safety. So side effects have been largely what we would expect from branded medications for years and years and years now. For the biosimilar, will be something very similar, in that as we have patients on it helping with their relapsing MS, that the effectiveness that we've come to understand with Tysabri will be there, and then the safety with all the same monitoring requirements in place, will help us keep patients healthy with kind of expected side effects that we know can happen with natalizumab or Tysabri.